the overall kind of purpose of these 3 sessions. So what we're looking at is this piece of where is our well-being, and this piece that all spiritual traditions and all religions point to one insight, which is that it's already in us and it's already kind of accessible in this present moment. We don't have to go anywhere for it. So the last session and the first session that we held, we were looking at, well, is that true in our experience? Not just as a nice sounding thing, does that actually seem true when we look at it close up and investigate it? And where we went, just as a kind of recap, was looking first of all at all the places where it doesn't lie, because we're all in this world, we're busy trying to find this peace, this love, this joy, this contentment, and etc. And we looked at all the places it doesn't lie, and when we look closely, we start to realize, well, it's not in money, it's not in the stuff that we have. They bring short-term pleasure, but they're transitory, or that state is transitory. It doesn't stay forever. It doesn't come in through the relationships we have, because they bring their own challenges and we have our ups and downs within those. It doesn't come from the roles, getting that promotion, being the father, the mother, whatever. It doesn't give a permanent state of well-being. We might have a spike, but we also have the ups and downs. And it doesn't lie in the future. And I think we talked about how many times have we moved those goalposts, move them. Every time we get there, we move them again. So those were all the places it didn't lie. And then if you remember, I asked you, I think, to close your eyes and to bring to mind a time when you've experienced true inner peace, true well-being, true contentment, and got you to tune into that, and then asked a few questions. And what we experienced through that, and I'm guessing that you all experienced the same, is that actually the thing that all of our experiences will have shared in common is that we surrendered fully to the present moment. When we had that experience, we chose to be there fully. We didn't want to be somewhere else. There was no resistance. We were also fully aware. You could almost say we were the awareness in that space. We were fully there, fully aware. And as a kind of default with that, actually, we weren't lost in thought. We were there. Again, this piece of pure awareness, not thinking about the place, pure awareness. And then we talked about, well, how quickly after that does the thinking kick back in? And then we're thinking about the lovely feeling we had, but that's very different from that real experience, that real depth. So we then started to talk about, so if that's our experience and we've all accessed it, we've all experienced what it's like, and actually those are the commonalities, then this session is focusing in on the dilemma. And the dilemma is, well, if that's our experience, if that is always within us, or if that's true, if it's always within us, well-being and inner peace and all the things we're looking for, then why isn't that our experience? Why don't we go through life with a big smile on our face the whole time? Why do we have so much suffering? Why that? Why the ups and the downs, the peaks and the troughs as our normal human experience? So that's what we're going to focus in on really deeply during this session. And then the next session, we'll kind of bring together the insights from sessions 1 and 2 and look at, well, actually, it's a very grand name, but what's the enlightened path? How do we take what we understand from these sessions and how do we live this new path, one of surrender and inner peace? What would that look like on a day-to-day basis, not just as a lovely theory? So let's focus in on this session and where we're going for this one. So I think I introduced you briefly to this metaphor last time of a river, and thinking of your energy as this river that kind of flows through us, or a channel that flows through us. And again, we're going to be touching on and drawing upon lots of the principles from within the yoga tradition. And again, not just the stretching kind of part of yoga that we all know, that most of us know yoga for, actually, this piece around the kind of karma yoga, which is about getting in touch with this energy that flows through us. And again, I'm not claiming to be an expert in this space. There are many people out there who will know a lot more about this than I do. And so all I'm doing is sharing what I'm seeing, what I'm noticing, what seems to be true for me. And my invitation is just check in for yourself. Does it feel true for you as well? And then go and explore as I'm exploring with it. But it just, my experience at this stage of my journey is this feels, it ties in with everything else that I've studied and that's resonated and worked for me. And it feels like it's the deeper piece. It takes you that bit further as well. So we have this channel. This is the theory, that we have this channel of well-being that's always running through us. And I'm deliberately doing this because it comes up as an ascension with this energy that kind of runs through our core. And the theory is that is what we get in touch with, or got in touch with, in that moment that we closed our eyes and got in touch with last time. That when we surrendered our resistance, when we became fully present, fully here and now, fully aware, what happened was without knowing we were doing it, we tuned into that channel. The energy that is always trying to flow, actually, we did something, we released the ability, or we connected with it and allowed ourselves to experience it as it came up and through us. So why then, if that's always there and always flowing, why then is that not our experience? What's getting in the way of it? And let's use this metaphor, an analogy of the river again, but this time, rather than thinking of it as flowing up through us at the moment, let's think of it in a slightly different way, or in a double way, that as well. So think of life as always happening. So there's a flow of life. Life is always unfolding, always happening, present moment after present moment after present moment. Your whole life is always unfolding here and now. So right now, this is an event that's taking place. And then after this, there'll be another event that's taking place, but constantly life is flowing. And what happens is, over time, innocently, we build up almost boulders within our own river, within the energy flow that's within us. And that gets in the way of the energy that is trying to come up, trying to come through. And this is why very young, young children, when I think of Jacob and Sarah, my children, you can just tell there's no real boulders. They have their emotions. They certainly have their emotions. They have their highs and their lows, part of the human experience. But there's nothing that is in the way of their energy. As soon as they're doing something, as long as they've not had a tantrum or whatever, or when they're in the middle of a tantrum, they are fully present and it's there. Like, Sarah over dinner tonight, just in hysterics over something completely nothing really, but totally lost in, laughter, completely immersed in it. And then that sets all of us off, and particularly Jacob is going for it as well. So there's this joy that we see in children that we love. We love it when we see it. It makes us smile. It's why lots of us love to spend time around children, particularly if they're not ours and we don't have to do all the clearing up after them. But there's something really joyous about being with them. And there's that purity and that pure energy that's accessible. And what it's starting to seem like, the more I'm looking at this, and again, the more I'm reading and I'm following some teachers in this space, it really is resonating with me. And again, I'm just exploring and checking it out. But it seems to tally with my experience that they haven't built up these boulders yet that get in the way of the energy. And as we go further on through our journey, innocently, and I use that word very consciously, there's no blame, there's no judgment here, but over time we build up these boulders that start to get in the way. And it can get to a place where there are so many boulders that we don't even think that well-being is anywhere within us. And we don't even think it's accessible. There's nothing I can do to get it. So what are these boulders then? If we're building them up innocently over time, what are they? What are they made up of? So within this karma yoga tradition, what it points to is they're made up of two things. Well, it's one thing ultimately, which is energy, trapped energy. But that trapped energy comes from two sources, two places. So the first is it is anything that we have resisted in our life. Anything that we have resisted. So an event, life is always unfolding, it's always happening. And then there's something happens. If we like it and if it's good, that's great. It's flowing and we're flowing with it. We're going with the flow of life. And we all know what that feels like. It's easy. There's no effort. Doesn't really take too much energy. If anything, sometimes we get energized by it. But then something comes that we don't like, really annoys us, or goes against how we think things should be, or it kind of triggers us in some way. And what happens is that we, quite understandably, and again, quite innocently, we close to it. I don't want this. I don't like this experience. I don't like what that person just said to me. I don't like this manager speaking to me in that particular way. I don't like that driver cutting me off in traffic, or whatever else it may be. I don't like, the rain today. I don't like that. That's not, it wasn't meant to rain today. It's my birthday. I was going to go for a walk. I don't like that. So there are some big things. I don't like this person being aggressive, and really small things. I don't like the weather. I don't like this. This isn't how it should be. And the theory is that so life is energy. Everything, quantum physics proves what all spiritual traditions have always pointed to. Everything is energy. Everything in our universe is made up of energy, including us, including me. You go get a strong enough microscope, you go far enough looking into what I'm made up of, energy and space. That's it. And that's true for everything in our universe. So life is energy flowing. And when we close, so life, when it's happening and we like it, it just comes through us. We experience it and it goes perfect. There's a perfection to that. And as it goes, we take in the knowledge, we get the wisdom and the insight of life's experience, but and the data goes into our mind, but we're not holding on to anything. We just take it in. But then something we don't like and we resist it. And what happens then is we close to it. And again, within this karma yoga tradition, the theory is that energy then gets stuck within us. The energy that is just part of the universe that could just have flown by and could have disappeared, we innocently, because we didn't like it, close around it, and actually it gets stuck. And the theory is that it gets stuck energetically, quite literally, within our own energy field. So each one of us has an energy field. We're made of energy. Ultimately, my body stays together because I'm vibrating energy, but there's something that keeps my energy all together. So there is an energy field here. But when we resist something, that energy gets trapped within us. And energy, you can't stop energy. It's one of the fundamental principles of our universe. You cannot stop energy. You can keep it stuck so it kind of stays in its space and orbits. It'll still move, but you can keep it in a certain place, but it's going to stay and move. But you can't end it. You can't get rid of it. So if you swallow anger or frustration or guilt or whatever else, whatever other emotion might be coming up from a reaction, that stays in us. We don't know it, but it's there. And the reason why, when I share that this feels true for me, and let me just check in with each of you whether this feels true for you. Think of a time when you have been triggered, something from your past that may have been like 10, 20 years ago, gets triggered by something that someone says or does in the present moment. So they say something that is maybe the same, they've called you your full name, and no one calls you your full name anymore. And it's what the voice your mum used to use, or that she used to use your full name when she was telling you off or whatever. or someone says something or does something, or even you hear a piece of music that reminds you of a really challenging, experience in your life that you close to in that moment, just tune in and check out, is there something timeless in that? Is it almost like it connects with something in you that is the past that's still there? And I'm guessing that when you look closely, you'll probably all have had that experience. I've certainly had it, where it's like, it's visceral. It's almost like, sometimes it's like someone's punched you in that moment, because it's like, whoa, the full power of that past experience comes back and hits you in that moment. And that points to me to this realization that the past, the former now, hasn't been fully processed. It's still in me somewhere. It might be laying dormant, a little bit like a dormant volcano, but when the right thing or the wrong thing happens in my environment right now, it can trigger these dormant volcanoes within us. And that seems to me to point to this realization that this energy is pointing to a truth, that there is this energy that's stuck in us. So that's the first type of boulder, is something that we have not fully processed, that was challenging in the moment, and naturally we didn't like it, we closed, we resisted it, and it got stuck in us. And then we got busy in the world and forgot all about it, but it's still there, and it's still waiting and lying dormant. The second type of boulder is an interesting one, because when I was first introduced to it, I thought, well, that doesn't sound quite right. Surely there's nothing wrong with that. But actually, when you look more closely, it makes perfect sense. And that is, the second type of boulder is anything that we have clung to. So anything in our life that we really liked and really wanted and be really happy that it's there. But then as we start to feel like our life is moving on, or maybe it's changing in some way, there's something about it that, no, energetically, we want it the way it was. So again, we are trapping energy that actually just wants to be let go. It's the past now, it's a former now, but there's something in us that's holding on to it. So for example, if you have a career, a moment in your career that you loved, the perfect manager, all the stars aligned, you had the perfect manager, the perfect role, the perfect project, the perfect team, it was amazing, you're loving it, and then you realize it's starting to change. Maybe the project is coming to an end, or the manager leaves and a new manager comes in and they're a micromanager or whatever. Just notice, is there a part of you that wants things to stay the way they were? Or a relationship that you loved, and now actually that's come to an end, and can we let it just become the past? Can we let it flow through and go behind us as it's intended to? Or is the part of us still clinging on to it? And the clue that these things are playing out is when these keep on playing on your mind, you still remember the relationship from 5 years ago, still causes you some suffering. Maybe you, and again, there are triggers in your environment that are surfacing these boulders that bring these dormant volcanoes up. So if there was a relationship that you loved and it felt really special and you thought they were going to be the one, and maybe you got engaged and then it broke off, or maybe they broke it off, but you're clinging to that innocently again on some level, then you could be watching a Netflix program, loving it, no thoughts about this at all, you haven't thought about it for weeks, and then the people in the Netflix drama get engaged, and boom, it's like you've been punched. And you then 5 minutes later, you're like, can I just rewind that because I've missed the last 5 minutes? And you list the last 5 minutes because all of that emotion, all the thoughts, all the hurt, all the pain, all the suffering has just come back in an absolute instant. So again, I always just tune into my experience, and I can only speak for myself, tune in to your experience as well. But it seems to me that this is pointing towards what feels true. That there are these two types of boulders that innocently over time I've built up boulder after boulder after boulder of things I've resisted because I didn't think I wanted them, I didn't think I could handle them, and things that I've clung to, things I've identified to. So we're talking ego in this space, things that I've wanted to stay the way they are. actually, again, there's energy that could have just gone and could have passed that actually is trapped in me. And there's a couple of equations, very similar equations that I was introduced to that I really love the simplicity of in this space. So one is that experience times resistance equals suffering. Experience times resistance equals suffering. If there's no resistance, there's no suffering there. As soon as we resist it, then there comes the suffering piece. And then the other one is experience, therefore, times clinging equals suffering as well. Or you could substitute the word clinging for attachment. Experience times attachment equals suffering as well. So it's just always being conscious. What am I bringing into this? Because the experience by itself, you cannot have experience equals suffering. That's not an equation, because the same experience for 100 different people leads to 100 different outcomes. So what is it we're bringing in the middle? And is it resistance or is it, some form of clinging? So what's pointed to in this tradition is that where these things get stuck, it's pointed to heart. So it's like these things, these experiences, these boulders, it's almost like they're building up in our heart center. So not our physical heart, but our heart, the energy center, right? In our heart area, our heart chakra. And again, yoga talks about all of these 7 chakras that run through the very core of our body. And energy, when there are no boulders, the energy will just flow, and it will flow upwards. And that is the experience of peace, love, joy, fulfillment, contentment, all of it rising up and through. And the higher the energy reaches, the higher chakras that it gets to, the higher that state of bliss that you can get to. So if your energy goes all the way to the crown chakra, right at the top of your head, just above, then that's where, we're talking about that sense of enlightenment, complete bliss, nirvana, satori, all these different words that have been used for it. But most of us, it seems, it's challenging that the lower chakras, which are all about things like fear and a need for control, that's where many of our boulders are kind of built up. So actually the energy doesn't even reach the heart level. But when you've had that experience of full surrender, which we've all had on occasion, fully immersed, I'm there, I'm seeing the sunset, or I'm whatever, that's where we get our glimpse of what it's like for that energy to get to our heart chakra or above. It's like we get a little glimpse of what is possible. And then the thinking comes back and the boulders come back, and life brings us some different challenges. So let me play this out a little bit with an example, like a personal example, just to bring it to life a little bit. So I remember I did a role, one of my first roles when I was in my 20s. I was very fortunate and got a pretty amazing job with an events company called the London Business Forum. They held some amazing events with some top speakers like Richard Branson and Bob Geldof and whatever. And it was a very small team. It was just me. At one point, it was just me and my boss. But at one point, we doubled in size to 4 of us. So we were holding these massive events and just a very small team. And I was there for 5 years. And by the end of it, I was getting up on stage and introducing some of these speakers and all that kind of stuff. So from the outside, it looked like a really shiny, amazing existence. The pay was pretty good and it was, quite exciting stuff. But I was struggling with a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. My mum had suffered with the same things when I was growing up, and I definitely picked up some patterns and some beliefs that weren't very true or helpful. So I was experiencing lots of stress, but I didn't really have the tools at that point to be able to cope with those and move beyond them. And I believed that the job was causing the stress. That's absolutely how it appeared, because I on the weekends I'd be fine, but I'd go to the job and then I'd feel stressed. So I built up this story that seemed very true, that this job is causing me stress. So I decided, I thought I was being really brave. I decided to hand my notice in. My then fiance, or then girlfriend, I think, but now wife, and I decided that we were going to go traveling, and she was happy for me to hand my notice in because she could see the stress it was causing, and I'd convinced her, as I'd convinced myself, that all my stress would drop away as soon as I left this job. So I handed in my notice, and then we were going camper vanning around New Zealand for a bit and then coming back. And the image I had in my mind was that I was going to, I didn't even know coaching existed. If I had, I'm sure I would have gone for it more, but I thought I was going to become a therapist. So I quit the job, and that's where I thought I was going to head on to. But I was like a rabbit in the headlights. I thought it would take all the stress away. But once I'd handed my notice in, I suddenly just froze. I was like, I couldn't apply for the courses that I needed to get onto. It all felt really daunting and really scary. And it just, yeah, I was in a real mess. So basically, I'd suddenly realized that I had left this job that was amazing, and suddenly it seemed this like perfect job. And now I'd gone to a void of absolutely nothing. And I remember then that I resisted this new unknown, full resistance. I was closing down around that, building boulders up all over the place. And I started to cling to the job that I just left. I really suddenly was like, I just want to go back to it. Like, why did I do that? Come on, it was the perfect job. And it led to huge amounts of stress for me. I wasn't flowing. If life is flowing, and life always is flowing, if it's a river, I was not in that flow. I was clinging on for dear life to like branches that were by the side or whatever. I just wanted to fight and swim my way back upstream, go back in time, which is not possible. So it was causing huge amounts of disturbance energetically for me, led to, the stress I had before was nothing compared to the stress I started to experience. And I started to experience depression as well, because depression is learned helplessness. And you are helpless if you're trying to go back in time. It's, good luck. So you're going to feel depressed. You're going to feel helpless. So that was all playing out. And what happens then in this personal experience is I try and calm myself down over the weekends, and I try and, think about, well, what's the next stage then? And what else can I do? And But what happens is these boulders were in there and I hadn't processed it at all. So now life, which is always unfolding, was suddenly going to have some triggers for me that never used to be triggers, but they're triggers for these boulders for me. So I remember I then got a different job that I really didn't particularly want, but I was on the bus going, I used to get the train and then I got a bus from in central London to get to this job. And I remember I'd be on the top deck and there's a point where it would go over one of the bridges and I would see St. Paul's, the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral. And the office I used to work in for London Business Forum was right next to that dome, like just behind it. So every single day, that was a trigger that triggered the boulders. It erupted. If you could have had a heart monitor on me on that train, on the bus, it was bringing up the past, those boulders, the suffering, the things I'd clung to, the things I was resisting, all were being triggered. So there was just, no one else would have known anything was going on. But for me, I was suffering every single day when that was playing out for me. And it was because I didn't know that I needed to fully process and fully allow what had come up for me to come up and for it to be fully experienced. So my invitation is just to, again, just tune in, see what feels true for you and see if this feels true with your experience. But what happens, see if it feels true that as you're going through life is always unfolding, always experiencing it. And if everything's the way that you wouldn't need it to be or want it to be, or it's not triggering anything, then there's a sense of flow and ease and it's all fine. But just check in whether this experience happens for you as well. That when something reminds you of one of these boulders, when it triggers an old energy pattern that's within you, that suddenly it's not all right. The world is not, it just brings back the past instantly in a really powerful way. And then just notice whether your mind then goes really crazy, because that's certainly my experience. The mind goes a bit mental and it starts firing off in all different directions. And what I noticed on that top deck of the bus was it started trying to solve the problem. So the emotions in the past have been triggered, the boulders have been triggered, and then my mind got really busy trying to solve the challenge as it saw it. So it started going, oh, what if I'd done this? Or maybe I should do that, or I could do this, or what about that? And da, 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 da. And that led, sometimes I bought into some of those thoughts. And, you know, one of the thoughts that would come up was, why don't you just give Brendan a call? You know, he'll understand, my manager, you know, the guy I'd handed in my notice to, the founder of it. Why don't I give him a call? And that was one of the thoughts, one of the, you know, my mind was getting really busy trying to solve this. And I remember calling him in a lunch break and saying, look, I've really messed up and I want to come back. And understandably and rightly, he said, actually, no, it would just be strange because we've moved on and we've hired someone and whatever. But just notice if that dynamic seems familiar, that life is happening and it's neutral. It's not trying to trigger us. It's just energy unfolding. It's just events happening. But just tune in and see whether there's something in you from the past that gets triggered by the neutral events that are happening. And then notice whether your mind then goes busy and gets very busy trying to solve it. And I've heard it described, Michael Singer is an amazing teacher in this space, really amazing teacher. And he talks about he struggled with this for years, for many, many years. He was like, why is my mind driving me insane? Why does it never shut up? Why has it got an opinion on absolutely everything that unfolds in my life? And he meditated on this for many years and went really deep with it. And then he said there was one day when he suddenly had the insight and he realized that, again, innocently and unknowingly, he had given his mind an unachievable task. And the unachievable task that he had given it, and it seems to me like we've actually all done this without knowing it, is to say, okay, think of your mind as your amazing tool, and it's perfect, it's neutral, and you are its programmer, and it will serve you. It's like a genie in a lamp. It will serve you based on what you ask, but be careful what you ask for. So imagine now you have this genie in a lamp, your mind, the most powerful tool we know of in the universe, and you tell it, you ask it to do this. You say to it, I don't feel okay on the inside. I feel stressed, or I have my emotions go up and down. I don't feel the contentment I really want. I'm not experiencing love and joy and all the things I want. So I don't feel okay on the inside. Actually, it feels pretty rubbish sometimes on the inside. And I need things outside of me. I need the world to look a certain way so that I feel okay on the inside. And another way of saying that is I need the world to not hit any of my stuff. I need it to not hit any of these boulders. So do that for me, mind. So that's the programming that we've innocently given our mind. And your mind, it trusts you. You're its master. So even if you don't know you've given it this instruction, just tune in and see if that feels like maybe on an unconscious level, whether that's what you've programmed your mind to do, again, innocently. And it really rings true for me that actually your mind then, it's been given this goal, but it's an unwinnable game. Because what it has been given to do is to change external reality, the world, events out there, to make sure that nothing hits anything that you've got stored up inside so that you can feel okay. Now, we only have to look at the news for like 1 minute to realize the world does not go the way we want it to go. it's not designed to match our stuff. And we've all, just on this call, we've all got different stuff. We've all got our own boulders. So if I need the world to be a certain way, then do you know what? Sorry, it's going to hit your stuff. And if it goes your way, then it's not going to go my way. And, you know, life has been evolving and is constantly evolving, you know, for 13.8 billion years. So for us to think that it needs to go a certain way for us in this moment to not hit our stuff, when you look at it objectively, we realize, yeah, that doesn't really make sense. That doesn't seem achievable at all. But that seems to be what's going on. So we have this stuff stored. We don't like it when it's triggered. So we need stuff outside of us to be different. And we tell our mind, without even knowing it pretty much, sort this stuff out. And the mind then gets really busy. And this, it seems to me now, like this is the source of judgment. I always used to wonder, like, why is it I judge, you know, situations and events? Why is someone good or bad, or this is right or wrong? Or, you know, it just seems, the mind just seems to have an opinion on absolutely everything. But it does now seem to be true that actually what it's doing is evaluating, is this situation as it's unfolding how I need it to be? And if not, how can I make it the way I need it to be? So what happens then is that if we have this stored energy from our past, these boulders, things we've resisted, things that we've clung to, then our energy cannot come up to the higher chakras, cannot come up to higher places. And we therefore are going naturally to react to the world based on the level that we are at in terms of our energy. So if my energy is low down in a place, and you know, this is pretty much synonymous with levels of consciousness as well. If my consciousness, my energy is trapped in fear or control or whatever else, these lower levels, then the quality of my doing is going to be really low. It kind of has to be. I can't act higher than where I am in this kind of energy game and this consciousness game. So again, you know, calling Brendan from a place of fear and lack, where my energy was trapped by the boulder that I'd innocently placed in there, that couldn't play out well. That wasn't coming from a place of service. I wasn't calling because I felt actually I've got lots to give. No, I was calling from a place of lack. I haven't got enough. I need you to give me something. So this is why it's called karma yoga. And you know, many of you will have heard of the term karma. So life can only energetically, again, every action is energy. Everything we do is energy. So life can only reflect back to us the quality of, at the same level as the quality of the doing that we did. So if our actions come from fear, then life, whatever those events come back, we're not in control of exactly what those events are going to be, but there's going to be an energetic match, and it's not going to be great down at those lower levels. So our role, and this is what we'll come on to in the next session, our role is to release those boulders from our past and to give our mind a different instruction, to allow it, to actually tell it, you know what, your primary goal is not to make the outside world fit perfectly what I need on the inside. That it's unachievable. You can't, even if you wanted to do it, you can't do it. So it's almost like saying you don't need to worry about that anymore, because actually it's an unwinnable game again. It's circling back to the insight we had from the first session. Joy, inner peace, fulfillment, contentment, love, everything you're looking for is already within you. So you don't need to get busy outside. You don't need to change anything out there to feel it in here. You don't need your boss to be a certain way. You don't need your partner to be a certain way. You don't need COVID to have gone away to be okay, the rules of the game suddenly change completely. It's about an inner game, which is winnable, which is when things trigger me, and they will, when life is unfolding and it triggers me, so what's been triggered? What part of me has been disturbed by this? And can I allow that to be released? Can I allow the boulder to be eroded away by the present moment experience? So over time, we are purifying that river of energy. We're clearing the junk that we innocently placed there. And just like a river, if you have a river with no obstruction, no boulders, no anything, that river runs pure and straight. Absolutely pure and straight. If you put lots of boulders in and lots of junk at the bottom, you'll get rapids on the surface. And that's our experience. And that's what's going on in our mind, all the rapids that are being triggered by the energy blockages down below. If you take those boulders away, the river goes back to running pure. The energy wants to run straight. It wants to run pure, and it wants to come up and through. So that's the winnable game. And it's not one that your mind needs to get busy with. It's a deeper kind of piece. So important here to say, again, there's no judgment with any of this. It's not saying that we've done anything wrong, because as far as I can tell, this is the human journey. We all build up the boulders, but we don't know that we're doing it. We all resist things that we don't like, because that seems really natural and like a defense thing. So that makes perfect sense. And we all cling to things that we like, because that seems to make sense as well. I want it. Why would I want to let that go? So it all makes sense. It's all innocent. But what we realize over time, or what I'm starting to realize, is actually we're blocking the energy. And when we look more closely, we realize, you know what, we can actually handle anything that comes our way in the present moment. Anything at all that comes our way in the present moment, you can handle all of it. And when you come from that place, then you can let go of all of this stuff. You don't need the world to be a certain way, and you don't need to cling on or resist anything. And the words that come up in this space are trust and surrender. So trusting in yourself that you can handle what comes, trusting in life that, you know what, it's not trying to get me and I can handle it. And then surrender, and these are the words we'll really come back to next time, surrendering the boulders, surrendering the things that have got in the way. So again, circling back just as a closing piece before we open up to questions for 10 minutes or so, circling back to what we touched on last time, what seems to happen to our well-being when we're having our normal human experience of life is unfolding and it hits something in us and the volcano erupts? What's our experience of well-being? It's not in me. You know, if I asked you right in the middle of being triggered by something, what, you know, oh, your well-being is inside of you, you'd probably punch me. Like, no, it's not. There's no chance. It's not in me. I feel terrible. And it feels that way and it seems that way. But actually, when we look more closely, it's in there. It's just blocked, and we've got lost in it, and we then get lost up in the thoughts that get triggered, thoughts of the past, thoughts of the future that get triggered when this happens. So yeah, this journey beyond it is to realize that we can handle whatever comes up. And as I say, next time we'll talk really deeply about what would that look like moment by moment. How do we release those boulders, and what would that look like living from a place of surrender and true inner peace? So I've talked enough. We will carve out some time at the end for anyone who wants to join for a meditation as well. So that probably means I think we've probably got just over 10 minutes for some questions. feel free to email them to Jane, or to put your microphone on and put your hand up. And yeah, but I appreciate I've introduced quite a lot of stuff there. So feel free to, there's no stupid question, just feel free to ask anything that's coming up and we'll see where we go.
Eve, I have a question. Thanks for that. I was wondering your perspective on whether you can cling to things that kind of haven't happened yet and how that fits into this, because if boulders are created by things that have happened in the past, then how do you, and I'm thinking specifically here of things like, one day my kids won't want to hug me so much, right? And I don't want that to happen. That's kind of clinging to them and that idea, but it hasn't happened yet.
Great question, Katie, great question. Yes, exactly. It's all part of the same picture. So again, just showing how it seems to me. All of this, with what we're talking about here is ego. So your ego is anything that you attach to, anything that you are clinging to, and anything that you're needing to be, you view as part of you, or you need it to be a certain way. So if I'm thinking that, oh, one day this special moment, this age is going to be gone, then by definition, where have I gone? I've gone up into thought. And when we go up into thought, which is a place we can go, there's nothing wrong with going to thought as long as we're going there consciously, but it's a tool that we can use. It's not, we don't have to be there. But for most of us, our experience is thinking happens and we're in it. Like we didn't know there was a choice, that we didn't have to go there. But if you can come from a place of conscious awareness, then thought is a place you can choose to go. Now, to go up into thought, which again is just a form of energy, to go up there and think about something that you might lose that you currently have, like that magical age with children of a certain age, then that thought comes with a corresponding emotion, comes with an energy with it. And we all know that. You think a happy thought, you feel a happy emotion. You think a fearful thought, you feel fear. So by going into that space, there is some energy that's created in our body. It happens instantly. Like we don't really get a choice in it. Once you have a thought, you've got the emotion. Now that emotion is going to feel like a bit of a disturbance. It's got an unpleasant quality to it. It's got a bit of clinginess to it, and a bit of lack and a bit of fear in there. Now, there's two choices then. The first choice is to resist that and go, oh, I don't like that feeling. That's not a good feeling. And that's natural. And that's certainly what I've done for the vast majority of my life. But if you think about that, you can think about that as you're closing almost around it. You're pushing it away. You don't really want that. And then you'll probably just carry on and do something else and distract yourself. But even just those innocent little moments, there's some energy that's been trapped. Now, the second option is, assuming you've gone to that thought, because you don't have to go there in the first place, but assuming that we do go there, the second thing is to notice, there's something a bit uncomfortable in me. There's a energy that doesn't feel so great. And I'm noticing that's because of that thought about, oh, what if, or when this passes, that will be sad. And the option then is just to allow yourself, so separate from the thought and separate from the emotion, you allow yourself to experience them, but allow them to pass as well. And all emotions have a half-life of 60 seconds, it's been shown. As long as we're not energizing them by giving them our focus and our energy, or resisting them, all emotions pass within 60 seconds or so. So you could let that one go, sitting in that seat of conscious awareness, allowing it to pass. And then once it's passed, it's no longer trapped in you. And that allows you to come back into the present moment again and just be there fully and just appreciating that moment. So what we're talking about here, and this is the when you're talking about Zen masters, with mindfulness, they talk about living on the razor's edge of the now. Now, the razor's edge of the now, as I understand it, is life unfolds and then it passes. and then life unfolds and then it passes. I'm not clinging, I'm not resisting anything. It's just unfolding and I'm fully immersed in that experience. Now that means I experience the highs and the lows, the happiness, the joy, the sadness, the fear, you know, whatever comes up, I experience it fully, but I appreciate that all of it is transitory. Everything that happens will pass, including these emotions. So it's okay, you don't need to get busy thinking, oh, that's a bad emotion, I shouldn't have had that. Allow it to pass. And the theory is that that might as well draw out something from your past that might have been in that similar space as well. So if there's something else that you've worried about losing something, then actually by allowing yourself to experience that fear but allowing it to pass, you might also process a boulder from the past that's to do with the same kind of experience. Does that kind of make sense and answer your question, Katie? Cool, great question. Okay, who has the next question? I think I might have seen one in the chat. Let me just double check. Okay, there is a question here. Okay, so I won't share who shared this just for confidentiality, but there's a question around if we've lost a loved one. And many of us, or pretty much all of us, I'm guessing, will have had that experience at some point in our lives. And for many of us, that's, you know, happening right now with everything that's playing out in the world. So the question was around, if I've lost someone really important to me, really close to me, there's a sense of wanting that not to be the case. I don't want to have lost them. So there's a natural sense of, you know, almost that clinging piece of wanting them to still be here. So how to reconcile that? And it's a great question. And I think what's coming up for me in relation to that is part of the human experience. It seems to be almost the journey of being here on this planet. It seems to be everything, the whole thing. We get the highs, we get the incredible times, we get the everything going in the way we want it to be. We get the times where all of our family are close and our loved ones are close and whatever. And we also get the shadow side of that. We get the down times, we get the challenges, we get the loss and the bereavement. We get times when things just don't go the way that we want them to. It seems to me that they are part of the whole. It doesn't seem to me that the goal is to just get the highs. It doesn't seem that's an achievable goal. So if all of it comes together, then what does this mean if we're going through the low times, or if we're losing someone that we really care for or really love? It feels to me like in that space, we are allowing ourselves to keep our heart. So your heart, you can think of as the place where you feel all these emotions. I've heard it described as almost like an orchestra. It plays these incredible symphonies, the highs that we love and the lows that are really moving and can be really challenging to feel. Now, when we lose a close loved one, we are going to absolutely be experiencing those real lows and those real challenges. When that happens, it's really natural to almost want to not feel that. It can feel really overwhelming, which would be almost the equivalent of going to see an amazing orchestral performance and then loving the bits where it's in the high bits and then just needing to leave the theatre or leave the arena when it gets to the lows. But actually there's something here maybe about allowing yourself to stay open to the full experience, keeping your heart open, so that you can experience fully the sadness and the grief and the loss without needing to push it away, without coming from a place of I can't handle this. Seems to be this deepest path is trusting that I can handle anything. So I allow myself to stay open and to feel these emotions. And what I've heard many people say is that when you can come from that place, you can actually, it opens the door to being able to experience the highs as well. There's a piece of almost, if you numb the dark, you numb the light as well. If we keep our heart open for the lows, it actually opens them for the highs as well. It means we can get the full orchestral performance in our life, which it seems like is part of what we're here to do, to have this full experience. So maybe just this piece of staying as open as you possibly can, being forgiving when that feels too much, but see if you can stay fully open. And that's part of the flow of life in that moment. It's feeling the sadness, feeling the grief, but staying open. And what that means is when life evolves, and it will, there'll be other times, suddenly time passes, but there's no longer that stored toxic energy. There's no longer that piece that hasn't been processed. You've experienced it all. On that person's birthday in future years, you can absolutely cry and laugh about some of the amazing memories that you have together, and sharing those stories with family. So you experience, even just in the memories, the full peaks, the full troughs, the full orchestral performance. There's something profoundly different between that and closing to something, or clinging and wanting it still to be the same, because a sense of clinging and wanting it to still be how it was actually closes you to the present moment. If you can sense that, it closes you to being fully with whoever you're with, or fully participating in life, because actually you're not really fully here and now. You're in thought about a former now, and by definition, that means you can't really be fully where you are in that moment as well. So this is deep work, and I'm really, I see myself as early on this journey. We're talking really, really deep work to stay open to this stuff. But it just feels, I trust things that resonate, and it feels true with my experience. And it feels like the path is to stay open, experience what comes. So I hope that's helped. Okay.
Sorry, can I just make a small comment there?
Yeah, of course, Christine.
I've got just one thing what I was going to say now. Yeah, it's about in terms of like loss and bereavement, and what you've just been saying, I totally agree, understand. You also, to be able to let it go, to face it and to accept it, you also there's also a guilt there. And the boulder, I think, is the guilt that you can't let yourself be happy about it sometimes.
Great reflection.
Do you understand? I don't know if I've made sense there.
No, it does. It does.
It's like a boulder. It's like the guilt of being able to be happy again and to be able to accept those things is a boulder that you need to be able to let go. And when you're able to let go of that boulder, like we've been talking about, then you can achieve some peace.
Yeah, I think that's a great reflection. And I think what comes up for me in that is everyone's boulder will be personal to them. So one person may experience guilt as the boulder. Someone else, their boulder might just be overwhelming grief or overwhelming sadness. And someone else, it might be
Dave,
anger.
can I just say, I actually think probably acceptance of a situation is probably the biggest boulder, whether it be grief, loss of someone, the end of a relationship. I think the acceptance of that is the reality of what has happened, and not clinging. I think that acceptance is probably the biggest boulder for me, especially.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. And it's this piece that, again, it almost seems like that whatever our experience is will feel like that is the experience. And it seems to me like we all because of our own journeys and our own patterns and things that we've done innocently, our boulders might look different for each of us. So for one of us, you know, if a partner was, or someone we loved was killed in a car crash by a drunk driver, my boulder might be anger. Might be very different to guilt, and actually maybe different from the acceptance piece, or although acceptance would be the path towards releasing that boulder. So the boulder itself will show up differently, and the boulder will be related to the thoughts that you've had that have created that boulder and that feeling. So it almost doesn't matter what has created the boulder in the first place. The key here is when we know we've been triggered, and you'll know it because something is coming up, whether it's guilt, whether it's anger, whether it's deep grief, or, you know, whatever it is, anything that feels like it's too toxic or too much, that's the time to then choose to stay open. And we'll come on to this in the next session. Stay open and stay conscious, and allow the cathartic process of that guilt or that anger or that whatever to be released, because it doesn't want to be in us. It's old energy. It's almost like stagnant water. It's been stuck there for too long. It wants to be released, but innocently we haven't let it be released because we don't want to feel it. So we're kind of keeping it down and squashing it. So there's a piece here about actually staying conscious and open and allowing that energy, that energy wants to flow, allowing that to go. And that's something that we'll absolutely come on to in the next session. But thank you. Some really, really deep and really important questions. I will reflect ahead of the next session how we bring some of this back in. And my invitation again is think of any questions ahead of that next session that would be valuable to go into as well. Thank you, because I appreciate just how important those questions and those situations are to you. So why don't we finish with a short guided meditation, just to get in touch with that stillness, that peace that's within us, as a nice way to finish. So my invitation, I might actually just want to shake something out to start with. If there's some energy that feels, you know, we've been talking about some pretty deep stuff, so maybe just allow that energy just to move a little bit. And then when you feel ready, you just want to make sure your feet are really nice and grounded if you're choosing to sit, or just whatever position feels comfortable for you. But feet nice and grounded. Take a couple of nice, really deep breaths. And when you feel ready, you can just very gently begin to close your eyes. And just take a couple of really nice deep breaths. In through the nose and out through the mouth or nose, whatever feels more comfortable for you. And just allow your conscious awareness to be drawn down from your mind, where it will naturally have been as we've been thinking through this session. Draw your awareness down from your mind and to your heart center. And just breathe into that space. And as you do so, keeping your focus on your heart, continuing to breathe into that space, just imagine your heart, that energy center right at the core of your being, just opening, so that any restriction, any resistance, any clinging is just released. So you just open the energy in that space and in that center. And there's nothing more that you need to do than just sit here and now in stillness with the intention of opening. There's nothing else that needs to be done here. Your mind doesn't need to solve anything. No judgment is needed. There's nothing to do other than rest here and now and open here and now. And as you rest here, just imagine that there is this stream of energy, this river of energy that runs right through your core, flowing up from the sacral chakra right at your base and all the way up through your heart and then up higher to your third eye chakra and all the way up to your crown chakra. Just imagine and just tune in to this very subtle energy flow, always there, always in the background, always wanting to flow, always wanting to ascend, just waiting for you to surrender and open to it. And as you keep that image in your mind of this flow of energy, this flow of light flowing through you, just imagine that as it flows up, it just dislodges and moves any of the boulders that may have been stored. And actually, while you're open, consciously open, the boulders become as light as feathers. And you realize that the river can just take them away so simply and so lightly. What seemed so permanent and heavy is actually just energy ready to flow away, ready to be released. and allow, as light as feathers, any of those boulders to flow up through your heart and keep going up as you stay open, and they go up through to the top of your head and out through the crown chakra, and they're released. And this is the cathartic process, allowing this energy to purify that river of energy within you. Just know, as we come to the end of this meditation, that that flow is always there. That the boulders aren't your enemy. That you haven't done anything wrong. That this is part of the journey, part of the process. And that you can tap into your well-being and everything you've ever looked for anytime that you choose. It's always within you. Okay, so just with your eyes closed still, just as we're approaching the end of this meditation, you might just want to bring a little bit of movement back into your hands, your arms. You might just want to roll your shoulders. And when you're ready, you can very gently begin to open your eyes and come back into the space. Okay. So I wanted to close just by saying thank you. Again, I really appreciate your time and your presence. I'm also really conscious that this was pretty deep stuff. And I'm conscious that, it's deep stuff for me and something that I'm on a journey with. So I hope it's been valuable. As I say, I'm not claiming by any stretch to have all the answers, but I'm just sharing what is seeming true. So my invitation to you between now and the next session, if you're joining that one, is just check it out for yourself. What's resonating, what isn't resonating, what feels true, what doesn't feel true, and just check in. Just get curious and see what comes up, and then we'll revisit and go to the next stage of the journey next time. Thank you. Jane, is there anything that you wanted to say?